Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to take another look at our fundamentals demo, and specifically, we're going to take a look at a way to test our Java application from the command line using input and output files. And then at the end of the video, we're going to focus on how to use batch files to significantly speed up your ability to test your application as you are working on developing it. Now, this video is not going to focus on how to do file I/O in the Java framework or with the Java language. As a matter of fact, we're not going to be making any modifications to our fundamentals demo in this video. Rather, it's going to focus on how to do this from the command line exclusively. Now, to begin with, what I want to do is I want us to show exactly what the problem is. And so to begin with, I'm going to go ahead and try to run our existing application, the fundamentals demo. And that we are going to see is going to be done through the Java runtime engine. So there's Java, the name of the package, our fundamentals demo. And then what we want to do is we want to pick one of the switches that we were testing in a previous video. And if you recall, one of the things that we had working was our ability to get info with object. And if you recall from that video, basically what it did is it got all of the information interactively from the user. And then once it got the information, then it simply put it into an object, or rather, each time it collected the information, it put it into a field in the object, and then it passed the entire object to a function called display info. Again, we're not going to be making any changes in our code, but rather what we want to do is emphasize how difficult this was to test. So again, thought I had copied this. We'll go back to the command line real quick. There we go. And if we run this, of course, we're being prompted with the information. I'm just going to go ahead and put in my name, my Blazor ID, initials, and you can quickly see how this is going to be quite a laborious process to do over and over again. So I'm going to abbreviate some of this. My goal is to get an A in the class. Maybe my goal is professionally to go to graduate school. Graduation date, spring of 2099. I'm just going to put in the latitude for my model. CPU, Intel. Basically, this is just an abbreviated list of what we were handling earlier. And then 4 gigs of memory. Basically, takes a while to do this. You can imagine if you're having to do this dozens of times, this would get pretty boring pretty quick. Also leads to potential for mistakes. There has to be a better way. Well, it turns out there is. And so what we can do is, much like we saw when we were working with our C executables, you can pipe information to and from the Java application from the command line. To understand what we need to do here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a file called input.txt, and we're going to put it in the same folder as your EE333 package. Essentially put it in the location that we are running the Java application from. And as far as the contents of this input.txt, you'll notice that I've taken our sample.txt and simply stripped off all of the metadata. In other words, all of the information that told us what the data was. So I've stripped off rather first name, colon, and the space. So basically, all we have here is the information that you would have otherwise had to put in on the console. Well, how we then utilize this is by simply piping, using our less than symbol, the contents of our input.txt to our Java application. And so once again, just like we were doing with our C applications, we can pipe information to our Java application, and each line in the input file corresponds to a prompt by the application, in this case, the Java application. So basically, every place where you collect information using the scanner, it's going to pull a line out of the text file. So it's important to make sure that you get the contents of that text file in the correct order. But more importantly, when you run it, you'll see that all of your hard work is now done for you automatically. And basically every one of these prompts that you would have otherwise had to answer manually is now being answered automatically. And you'll see then we get the same output as we got in our earlier video. Well, that handles input. What about output? Well, let's give it a shot. As a matter of fact, we're actually going to do it the wrong way first so you can appreciate what's going on. But I'm going to pipe now out from our application to another file that I'm going to conveniently call output.txt. And probably should take a second to point out that the names of these files don't really matter, just as long as it's a file extension and name that you recognize. And so if we use a single greater than sign, remember that it's going to overwrite the contents of whatever is in that text file if it exists, and if it does not already exist, it's simply going to create it. If you use two greater than symbols, then it's going to append an existing file or create one if one does not exist. So at this point, let's just go ahead and run it, and we get some less than stellar behavior. As a matter of fact, it doesn't appear as if our application is doing anything at all. Well, that is not completely accurate, because you'll notice now there is an additional file in this folder, specifically a file called output.txt. And if you drag and drop that into NetBeans, you'll see that it has started to write the prompts that we would have otherwise seen on the console. Effectively, what's happening is it's piping it not to the console, but piping it to our output.txt. And to emphasize what is going on, I'll actually answer the prompt by putting in my first name, hit enter. Again, nothing happens. I know that the second question is asking for my last name, and so on. And you can come back here to the text file, and you'll see that it is actually updating our output.txt. So while this might be useful behavior, it's probably a little bit awkward to do it this way. So what we can do here is let's go ahead and close out our output.txt. Let's go ahead and stop our executable. And then let's go back to the folder and delete our output.txt. And what we can do now is we can go back to where we were leveraging our input.txt and combine that with the piping to the output file. And you'll see once again, nothing's happened. However, we now have an output.txt file. And more importantly, it has the contents of not only the prompts, but also the output from our application. Again, if you go back to your fundamentals demo, you'll see that after we collected all the information from the user, we made a call to our display info, and our display info simply printed out in a nice format. Instead of writing it to the console, which it was still doing, behind the scenes, our console was then piping that output to the output.txt. Hopefully you can see how this will be incredibly advantageous when you need to test something over and over again. Now, I'd like to do one more thing before we leave this topic, and that is fully automate this or even further automate this. And what you can do now is you can come along here in the same folder, and we're going to create a new type of file called a batch file. And we're just going to call it test.bat. Now, it's going to prompt you, do you want to change the extension? The answer is yes. And if you double click on it, then it will simply open a black box quickly and close it. Instead, what you want to do is drag it and drop it into NetBeans or right click and edit it in Notepad. But what we'd like to do is very carefully come along and simply copy the contents of the command line and put it into the batch file. I'm going to go ahead and save this batch file now, and then I'm going to come back over to our console one more time, and I'm just simply going to run test.bat. And you can see that it doesn't appear as if a whole lot has happened, but just to prove that something has actually happened, I'm going to go ahead and delete the output.txt. I'm going to rerun my batch file, and sure enough, it has ran our Java application and done the exact same things that we would have done from the command line. Now, how is this advantageous? Well, if you want to test multiple input files, you simply just create multiple input text files, have multiple lines in your batch file, and then you can choose to either append or create a separate set of output files for each case that you wish to test. Again, very similar to when you were working with C executables. As a matter of fact, this is a pretty universal way of testing command line applications. So hopefully you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you for watching.